So now we move into a slightly more technical part of this. We are talking to or with the tech giants. Ooh. So I will have one giant on stage, and then the other giants are joining us on the big internet. So even if the accessibility industry is really growing fast, with the, at least in Europe, with the legislation and so on, we are still kind of a small industry. And I think it's very clear that even though we are doing a really great job, all of us, we need more enablers and more muscles and more resources to really be truly successful in changing the world for the better for people with disabilities. So the large companies, some of them very well known to us, like Microsoft or Google, what they do in accessibility really has a fantastic ripple effect, or it's scaling in a way that the accessibility industry in itself cannot do. And fortunately enough, these big companies also do a lot for accessibility and also a lot of research. And there's also another kind of way of looking at enablers in the generalist ICT companies, or what I call pointless ICT. So all the IT guys that are actually implementing and using the tools and making sure that this kind of comes out to the big world, that is where we also need to make sure that they have the basic knowledge of accessibility. So it's not just the kind of the generalist ICT companies doing their thing, and then after comes all the accessibility experts and try to remediate. That's working backwards. So really having large ICT companies doing things correctly from the beginning is also extremely important. So that is why we have invited for this panel to kind of look around the corner and see what's in the future, and really nice and interesting things that are coming up technically from the big guys. We have Aapo Latvala from Microsoft here locally and in the panel here on site. And then we have Christopher Patnoe, who is the head of accessibility inclusion in Europe, Middle East and Africa, and Neil Milliken, who is the global head of accessibility at Atos. And Aapo is the cloud solution architect, application innovation, accessibility of Microsoft. That's too long. I couldn't remember all of those. Do we have our... Yes, we have. Very good. Here you are. And I need to have my computer. This is really difficult. I have so many things that I need to remember all the time.
Let me test it at this point. Does it work? Can people in the back hear me? Everybody's nodding. Wonderful.
If they don't, then you will never hear from them. So, Christopher and Neil, you managed to get into the secret green room. That's good. Good to have you here. So I would like to ask Neil, to start with Neil. What technical innovations and ideas for increased accessibility do you work on right now, or what do you see coming up very soon? Or maybe what are you dreaming of in the future?
You don't really want to ask me what I'm dreaming of, because that's not broadcastable. Okay, but in terms of accessibility, clearly there's an awful lot going on with AI. What we need to be doing is thinking about how we integrate that properly, how we also, as you mentioned, get everybody that's doing the work on integrating new technologies to be thinking about accessibility. In a specific area where we're using AI to help us gain a better understanding of accessibility requirements and legislation, etc., because as an international group, we're present in 70 plus countries. We've got around 100,000 people working for us, and we can't expect everyone to know everything about all of the regulations and legislation in all of those countries. And even though I've ended up hiring some lawyers, even they can't be available all of the time to do this. So we're using large language models and our own prompts and work with our legal team to make this information available to people through chatbots. And so far, I think that's quite exciting, because people are able to get access to accurate data pretty quickly, and we validate that data. And that's a really important point, because there is the whole sort of hallucination prospect with AI. It kindly gave me an MBE when I asked it to produce a PowerPoint about myself. I haven't yet got any honors from the Queen. Maybe it was just anticipating my ambition. But we can't afford to have those kind of mistakes when it comes to asking about regulations, asking about standards, etc. So we want, really good quality information. And then the other things that are really exciting me are the things around language and support for myself as a person that uses assistive tech and has dyslexia and ADHD. So I am neurodivergent. I have cognitive accessibility needs. Really, it's the first time in a couple of decades that we're seeing new affordances for people with cognitive accessibility needs. So that really excites me. The ability to have proper conversations with tech and for it to understand what I need to do and to be able to anticipate. Now, we have the illusion of that at the moment. What we don't have is the sort of day-to-day robust reality of it. You can talk to a machine, but the likelihood is that it doesn't really fully understand you and the nuance and the context. So those are the things that I'm looking forward to into the future as really powerful for accessibility from a cognitive point of view. And then actually we're just having to deal with a huge amount of data. My job, the really boring meat and bones of it, is around governance and mapping all of this stuff at a corporate level. So as a systems integrator, we've got tens of thousands of different product lines and different products and configurations and so on. So using the technology to help us do that work, to build the inventory, to understand the levels of accessibility of all of these other products, many of which we don't own and we don't control because we're putting together and configuring other people's products. So there's a lot going on in the space around sort of how we can manage data and how we can use these systems to make it easier for us as humans to do our job.
Good. And you're actually taking a breath. That is good, because otherwise I would have tried to stop you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Neil. We also have two other panelists. So Aapo, what's going on in Microsoft that you can share and that is kind of cool when it comes to accessibility?
So something really cool right now would be agents. I'm quite certain a lot of people have heard about agents at this point, but I like to call them the technology that I've been waiting for 3 years now. Because agents will be the autonomous part of what I like to express the digital self, the digital me. If you think of technology as an extension of yourself when you are moving around the internet, when you are looking for data, agents will be the technology format that will be able to do stuff for you as you in digital format. So agents would be the thing that we're really working on. You might see it on Microsoft News a lot, but to my kind surprise, my customers are heavily interested in this, and I have the privilege to working on with a lot of customers on this technology.
And is that in a specific sector or in general?
In general.
Yeah.
In general. It is not public sector limited. It is not private sector limited, or it's not even the size of the enterprise. I've been working with teams of 3 to teams of 300, and everybody is equally understanding and excited about this technology, how it can change the way we interact with data. Imagine you having an application that is you in digital format, so you don't have to go to a specific website to do your shopping done, because you have your shop within that application and you just have multiple shopping bags in it. It's a wonderful time we live in.
Yes, or scary, depending on your viewpoint. So, Christopher, what's cooking in Google? The short version of everything cool that is happening.
The short version? That's no fun.
Okay, do the long version.
No, it's okay. We might be able to do that. For me, what's really exciting is this intersection of AI and accessibility, but it doesn't have to be the large language model agent stuff, because that's still so new. Not everybody gets it. And I think what's really important for people to realize is that the tools that you have in your pocket today is probably underutilized. If you don't know what exists today, it's not going to be able to help you. So, for example, on Android or in Windows Live, we have the ability to create real-time captions in many languages, and these models are getting very, very good. We also use computer vision in applications like Lookout, or even we're actually even using on-device language models called Gemini Nano to help with talkback in terms of providing thoughtful descriptions of images built into your normal interface of talkback. So this thoughtful design, disability design-led innovation is what excites me, because we get to make these small tweaks to things people already know how to use and can make their life significantly better, compensating for that gap between what a person can do and what the technology or society allows us to do. That's exciting for me.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to both of you or all three of you, I mean, how do we get people to understand what's out there? Because there's so many tools, and some of them are quite new, I think, to users. And I mean, it's interesting that you say that we could kind of tweak the things that people already know how to use and make them better. I like the sound of that, because what we feel when we do user testing is that the users don't know of all the nice things that are kind of more or less hidden in technology today. So will it be easier for people with the agent? Maybe it will be easier, but I mean, in general, how do we make sure that people understand all the things out there? How do you do that in Atos, Neil? How do you make sure that your users understand the cool features or know where they are?
It's a challenge. Even within the sort of Microsoft product set, there's a huge variation in the availability of features depending on, which version, which platform, which language, which region, whether or not you're in public sector or not. So we actually invest a considerable amount of time building up a database of all of these different features so that we're able to, as part of our communications to our employees and our clients, inform them of these features, but it can be overwhelming, and it's human nature to actually sort of ignore a lot of the information about new features. When you get a new version of Teams, which is pretty regular. Now, I'm just picking on Teams because it's the one that happens most. You usually get a little tiny notification that says, there's new features. And the first thing you do with that notification is dismiss it. So some of the stuff that we're trying to do is work in ways where we can enable people to access that information later in the cycle by interacting with, enhancing things like tooltips and so on. So there are various different pieces of software that we provide to clients that provide information and short little learning points about features that they can discover as they're going through systems. And then some of it is just the sort of basics of newsletters, webinars, announcements, and trying to hit all of the different communications channels to make people aware of this stuff, because people consume information in lots of different ways. So just putting it in one place doesn't work.
Okay, so let's go back to the European Accessibility Act, which we have kind of touched upon the whole day today. So from your perspective, Christopher, at Google, what are the main challenges for you and for your clients and everyone around you? I mean, there are a lot of issues, but what are the main challenges you think in making organizations adapt or comply with the Act?
I think one of the biggest challenges is that it's a little unclear still. There's gaps in different areas. There's different interpretations from different member states. Different lawyers, even in the same company, could interpret things differently. So understanding what's really there is one of the biggest challenges. And this isn't just in Google. This is any place that I've ever spoken to. Understanding what we really have to do is going to be interesting and challenging. And then what does it actually mean when the rubber hits the road come June? What does the world look like in July? Is it going to be a bunch of member state organizations who don't know anything about accessibility causing trouble because they're trusting they're trusting the community to say this is wrong, even though it's not be? So what does it actually look like when it's enforced is sort of an existential concern. So understanding what we have to do and then what happens when it's there is enjoyable, for sure.
But it's also what brought you to Europe in the first place, right? So you're kind of thankful for the act.
Well, especially now, yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's not go further into that discussion. So, Aapo, from the Microsoft perspective, the unclarity, I guess you would say the same thing, but can you see other challenges with the act?
So I really like Christopher's answer there, and I'd like to extend it with the topic of cost. So not necessarily new systems costing X amount, but more of a sunken cost fallacy many people must be familiar with. So we've got our wonderful system that we spend so much time and money and effort on, and it works, and it still works, and we put so much effort. We don't want to let go, but it has to work with this newer technology now. So people kind of needs to learn to let go, even if it's a dear system that was built from the ground up, writing PowerShell in 1998. Even when it didn't exist. But cost will be the major driving factor and the major hindering factor for EAA.
Yeah, but isn't that the case with technology also for other reasons than accessibility, that all of a sudden you need to kill your darlings because somebody like Google or someone else kind of invented something that means that you need to change? I mean, isn't that, it can't be just accessibility that pushes people over that?
No, it's the exact same thing with AI.
Yeah.
Whichever AI workloads, whether it's large language models, image recognition, whichever it is, retrofitting it is going to cost you more than building something new.
So let's continue to say that accessibility is just like AI, because then we are kind of making accessibility really hot topic again. So I like that connection. So from your perspective of more of an implementer of ICT, Neil, at Atos, what are the main challenges? And I know your list is long, but if we could get the highlights, please.
Significant challenges is understanding at what point does a product become a new product. In the world of evergreen IT, the Act applies to new products. And at what point does an incremental change in a product render it new and therefore bring it into scope of the law?
Yeah, very good. So what we have already talked about what is kind of around the corner, but is it something more you would like to see in the future, or something that you can kind of foresee coming up in the maybe next years or something like that? What is happening in Microsoft? Something you can share?
There's a lot of bubbling under.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, the only thing I really want to offer is I brought some Microsoft Surface adaptive kits. So the first 5 questions from the audience will get a Microsoft adaptive kit free on me this time. Okay. When it comes to technology, something cool that I feel like everyone here should experience one way or another. OneCourt is a device released a year ago. They just made a new version last December. It's a tactile sports viewing system. I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful startup, and they build it on Azure. It's a glorious reference point for many things, but literally a tactile system that allows you to follow your favorite sport in a better format. That's what I find cool.
That is cool. That is very cool. Yeah. So Christopher, any new cool stuff you can share with us, or something coming up?
The stuff that I'm most excited about is probably really, really nerdy. It's the integration of large language models on devices, which I mentioned a moment ago, inside TalkBack, is really quite profound, because it hits everyone. It provides a really thoughtful view of when someone doesn't create an alt text, and it's not one of these 7-paragraph poems that we get from ChatGPT. It was actually co-designed with people who are blind, trying to understand what are the kind of things that we want, what is the density, how much information is worthwhile. So these small tweaks that use these latest technologies really get me excited, because it allows us to give it to people in a thoughtful way.
And maybe you could expand a bit on what the on-device means when it comes to privacy and those things, so people who are not really familiar with the differences, just to give a little bit of framework.
Of course. Yeah, so there's two ways to think about cloud computing, and AI is just a form of cloud computing. It is either in the cloud or it's on the edge, and the edge in this case is on your device. So something that is on device is going to have less latency, which means it talks to you faster. It doesn't have any internet connection required, so that's much more secure. But it may not be quite as accurate as when you set it up to the larger models in the cloud. So it's an interesting compromise. So we really had to work closely to tweak this model to meet the needs of the blind community.
Thank you. And Neil, what are the cool stuff happening at your end?
So I mentioned agents already, but it's actually building the layers of different agents to enable joined up processes. So you end up with having multiple AI agents carrying out joined up processes across an organization. So you can automate series of decision-making processes, etc. Of course, you need to be really careful in what you're designing into those decision-making processes, because I know that the real concerns amongst the disability community, myself included, are around the bias that you can build into models and decision-making systems. But from a purely efficiency-based point of view, for me, running some of the programs that I run internally, building these multiple agent systems enables us to really make some progress on stuff that was too hard or under-resourced in most large organizations, because it was requiring too many people, too much time, too much data previously. So this is not so much an assistive technology, but an enablement that changes the way that we're able to deliver more accessible systems.
Can I hop in here? One thing is we have these different terms of assistive technologies and helpful technologies. And I think that barrier is probably too firm. I would love to be, as someone who's dyslexic and can't read lots of information, having an agent we have one, of course. We call it deep research. But having someone provide the context for lots of different websites is really, really helpful. And it's assistive. So it doesn't have to be anything as precise as like a magnifier for it to be assistive. So it's helpful. So if we consider helpful and assistive more similar, I think that people will be more likely to engage in these things.
This is what I was talking about when I mentioned that this is the first new set of assistive features for me and for my needs in a couple of decades. So I would kind of class them as assistive tech, but many people wouldn't.
And maybe that's kind of where we are moving into, kind of a really mainstreaming of these things, where we don't have to define it as specific assistive technology or adaptive or accessible, whatever features, but really that is just supporting everyone, which is kind of nice, because I think it's democratizing the whole thing, and we don't need to point to people that you have this disability and you have that disability and therefore you need this. We just provide the services to everyone. So I like the kind of the smell of that. Hopefully we will move in that direction, all of us. So I wanted to open the floor for questions. Do we have yes, we have questions, and we have a microphone runner as well. Oh, now we have plenty of questions.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Adela from Ireland. We work with a lot of kind of larger companies like banks and insurance and so on, but they're really at the very beginning. Like, they know nothing about accessibility other than what we've told them, and they're kind of scrambling in terms of the EAA. So I'm just wondering, do you have any advice on like how to set up the business or process to actually enable you to become accessible and actually implement the features from the audits and so on? And I guess the question is for whoever wants to answer.
Patience. No, I'm not even kidding. It's repetition over repetition over repetition. The processes will come with the company's culture. So what you need to do is repeat, see what sticks, repeat it again, see what sticks, and continue building processes from there. Just like we heard earlier today, in the HMN story, the company culture will affect how the accessibility circles are being built. So patience is your number one key on this situation.
Yeah,
Neil, do you want to jump in? Oh, sorry, Christopher first. Yes, please. No.
Yeah, because you're in Ireland, I'm sharing this, but this is not necessarily an option for everyone. In Dublin, Google has an accessibility discovery center, and it's free to get access to, and it's a great way to get leaders excited about accessibility and disability inclusion. So that I can put the link inside the chat, but that's one way is to get people excited by showing them what does this assistive and helpful technology look like, and get them inspired, because different people are motivated by different things. If they're only motivated by lawsuits, the EAA is a great opportunity to get them scared. If they're motivated by inspiration and altruism, something like the ADC can help, because along with patience, you need to learn to speak different languages at different levels, because the people you need to convince are motivated by different things.
So thank you for marketing the Google Accessibility Labs. That's good. There are others in the world and also other companies and institutions that are providing the opportunity to meet with users and test assistive technology. But the Google ones are really cool. But I just want to say that there are also others. Neil, you wanted to say something as well about this.
Yeah, I think that you need to sort of understand the organizational culture, as has been said before, and to really look at ways of what's your company good at? So, for example, where do you have a similar system of governance that may go across the organization? And one of those areas is likely to be around sustainability. So we mapped all of our accessibility stuff to sustainability. That's particularly important in terms of corporate reporting in Europe now, because everybody has to report against the ESRS, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. So if you can persuade your organization and the banks that some of the impacts of inaccessibility are material, then it becomes something that they have to report on, and they are bound by the governance of the organization to start putting this into a plan. So it's, again, long term. You do need to be patient, but you can start weaving these things into the governance of the organization so that it's not just one or two heroic people trying to make the effort. It becomes something that all of the organization needs to contribute to.
Very good. So we have 3 really good recommendations and tips here. Did we have another? I think I need to give the floor to Mitchell because I kind of ignored him the whole day. Sorry for that. He was speaking so much yesterday.
The Microsoft Lab, by the way, it's in Redmond.
Hi.
Free to visit.
Hi, thank you. This is Mitchell from TBGI. You described getting nerdy for a moment. I love the idea that personalization can become mainstreamed and not marked as accessibility. At the same time, if I'm not mistaken, the EN 301549 draft, I said nerdy, has changed user preferences requirement to things that are marked as accessibility. Is that a step backwards that we should correct because the trend is away from marking features as accessibility?
It's an interesting question. Does anyone want to? Neil, looks like you're taking a breath to say something.
I have an opinion on it. I think that when it comes to the law, you need something that's to be defined as accessible, because if you don't, what you've got is a grey area that is open for interpretation. And when you have those grey areas and that uncertainty, it becomes very difficult for organizations to know what to do in order to comply. Now, as an end user, as an advocate, and as a user of technology, I want everything to be useful. And I think that when we are looking at aging populations and so on, they're not necessarily going to think of the stuff as assistive technologies. But in terms of when you're defining stuff on how you comply with regulations, then I think that those stricter definitions are important.
Yeah. And Christopher, you were kind of waving, but...
That was a supportive gesture. Yeah, for me, the awareness problem is the problem with calling it accessibility, because not everyone wants to be or thinks of themselves as being disabled. You just need a little help. So it's an interesting line of how do you communicate thoughtfully and legally, and you have to work with your counsel to make sure that you're doing this consistent within your corporate environment.
So if a requirement helps solving for one through there, we can extend it to many, apply the industry practices. I'd say it's necessary for now, not necessarily a step backward, considering we're bringing a lot more audience into the industry with the new act. So I wouldn't say it's a step backwards, but more of a sidestep.
Yeah, and I would say it's more that we need different language in different contexts. That's kind of what Neil is saying as well, I think. And I think we had another question here. Sorry for making you run around, but it's good. It's your exercise for today.
This is Rosa. It's kind of related to last question, actually, a little bit. And whoever would like to answer, I will be happy to hear your opinion on that. So it is like, Susanna also mentioned that we call it assistive technology, we call it mainstream. And then now it's a little bit more like, in quote, normal thing. So it's not being differented. So what is the challenges you see that we can come to a certain level that everything is going to be by default, like in terms of accessibility, when it comes to accessibility, like we will not need to the checklist and the EAA or something, but everything is going to be by default, like because we need it for all. So what are the challenges to come up to this kind of mindset? Or like, what is your experience? Because
now you have that's 15 questions already,
yeah,
Rosa.
okay.
So let's stick to when can we all retire because we've fixed this and accessibility is by default already? That I heard that question. Christopher, when are we when is accessibility finally by default in all Google products?
That's a very loaded question. I think
so
I
reflect
think
on something in that direction, then, please.
I think the more fair question to ask actually is, how do we stop people from doing the wrong thing in general? Because we have 1.1 billion websites, as an example, with another 50 of them being created every second, where there's no way to create all of them accessible because people don't know or they don't care. So the more interesting question is, what do we do because that's the case? And here's where platforms like Microsoft Windows or Mac OS or Chrome OS or Android can really help sort of lift the bar, raise the boat, getting my metaphors confused. So you have platforms that can create captions. You have platforms that have built-in screen readers, that have built-in magnifiers, or you can buy them if your platform doesn't have it. But the more the platform can sort of bridge the gap between what the content is and what the person needs, and then let it be personalized. So don't make it a tick box exercise. If you need larger fonts or more contrast, allow the tools, allow the technology to be that kind of customized, because nothing is going to be 100% accessible for everybody. That's not reasonable. There's no such thing as perfection. So how to make it easy for people to be able to adapt it for themselves, and platforms are one way of doing this.
And are we moving in that direction? I mean, do you see that evolving? I kind of sense that you think.
Do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For example, I was recently really impressed with Microsoft ASR at a conference that was at last week. Really thoughtfully, really well done. It's got significantly better over the past year. Bravo. And these kinds of things make a big difference, so that someone didn't have to have an in-person captioner for a 20-minute meeting. The captions were great, and I was really impressed. So these platforms are certainly stepping up to help these things happen.
Okay, Christopher, it's just good competition that motivates us to do better. So thanks for that too.
Totally.
And what do you see? Are you also seeing the same kind of progress in that direction that Christopher is talking about? That more and more will be built in, so it will be actually harder to make mistakes and easier to make it right? Or do you see that happening?
I'm going to bring back the topic of the digital me. What is a digital me? So again, if a technology is an extension of us, what is it when I'm using an Android phone, when I'm using an iPhone or a Windows device or whichever device it is? I'm that digital format, so I need to fetch this data. I need to interact with this data. I don't think we will ever be ready. I don't think this industry will ever be done as we consider definition of done. What will happen is accessibility as a concept will change. We will go down the line, humans as species, with different definitions. What kind of features will we be regulating against in the future? Today we are there's no public opinion about something very cloning. Cloning is something that is not really discussed much, but it exists as a concept. So maybe in 100 years, there will be a lot of discussion about cloning animals or humans or whichever, but we don't really have anything in saying that. But we as a species, we are constantly evolving, constantly changing. Therefore, our accessibility standards will change. Therefore, the industry is never really going to go away or be done.
And we can never retire. That was depressing. And Neil, did you want to comment on that as well?
Well, I'm planning for retirement by training up the next generation in anticipation that the job is not done. Yeah. So, and I do think things will evolve. I think that some of the stuff needs to be in the creation tools and the content creation tools. So whilst it's great to have stuff built into the platforms to deal with innately inaccessible content, having some guardrails within content creation tools that help produce content so that it's born accessible is also really important. So, the major website hosting platforms for smaller websites, like WordPress and Wix and others, the more that they can improve so the sort of the standard templates and the content production processes enable people to produce accessible content, the more we create websites that work for everyone. Likewise, we're inside organizations creating your corporate document templates to make sure that they are properly structured, to make sure that the PowerPoints and so on are properly structured. So you don't start out with an inaccessible document. Those kind of things, they're a little bit boring, but they're things that all organizations can understand and get to grips with that can make a big difference.
Yeah, very true. So thank you for kind of bringing in the content creators as well. So we're not only talking about tech in this session. Thank you. So we have a question in the chat. No, we have a question in the audience. So the microphone carrier wants to ask something. Is that allowed?
I'm not sure. So hi, Malin from Funka Foundation. I wanted to ask, with AI, we talk about a lot of the possibilities. Do you see any large risks with this very fastly evolving technique?
Okay, we only have 6 minutes, so don't take all the risks, please. But Christopher, do you want to start with the risks of AI?
The two big risks are the one that we normally talk about. It's lack of representation in the data and lack of and bias in the algorithms, and these reinforce each other. This hasn't changed. It's not going away. But the large organizations, the Microsofts, the Googles, where we have processes and protocols to try to reduce these biases, but it could still happen. My bigger concern is the smaller shops, the DeepSeek, these other organizations that don't have these kind of protocols in place, and the people who rely on those models. That's where you get to see these biases reinforced. You get to see incorrect decisions being made because a vast number of people's needs and expectations aren't being represented.
Yeah. Anyone else wants to add something to the AI risks?
Maybe it's the hasty and too quick of an approach, making uninformed decisions on how to use this. People treat it like a TV. So you buy a TV from your Elk shop, and you go to home, you unbox it, you throw it in the corner, plug it in, and boom, it works. But do many people know that TVs also, they function as computers? They collect data and they send stuff over the internet. No, they don't. But this is a thing. The point I'm trying to make, if you use AI as one master key for everything, it's not really going to perform as well as you want, and you're going to be risking yourself on misuse. Instead, you should be considering the context in which you use the AI in.
Yeah, so both how the industry is using AI when they develop things and also we as users. And I'm still kind of amazed or scared by grown-up people who actually thinks that AI knows things. I mean, how can people still think that? That's that's a scary thought. So we need the humans to kind of make sure we use AI in the right way. That's for sure. So one more question from online is: as tech is evolving to add accessibility tools, is there an effort for backwards compatibility in tools so that they are available universally?
I wish.
Okay. Anyone else? Neil, do you have a? Oh, sorry, Christopher. Yes, please.
Well, this is what I was talking about platforms. You take a look at, for example, I'll talk about Google Chrome this time, since I talked about Microsoft last time. Google Chrome as a browser can take old videos that have never been captioned and never been transcribed and provide you these for free on your device. In fact, it can also provide a version of it that goes into a refreshable Braille display. So these platforms can provide that backwards compatibility for content that was created inaccessibly. One of the other challenges we have, though, is as these technologies evolve, sometimes the UX changes, and that can confuse people. We was mentioned about Teams just a moment ago. It's true with all technology; it's always changing, and that provides a break in terms of understanding if it's a very large change.
So, having seen what people build, having seen hundreds of integration platforms and backwards compatibility in many areas, I personally, this might not be a Microsoft stand, but it's a Microsoft representative telling you right now, but I personally am against backwards compatibility in the sense that it is most often built with lesser efficiency in CPU or GPU, meaning that it is not as good for the environment as rewriting the logic with modern techniques. Therefore, if we consider software, I'd rather pitch in talking about innovation and rewriting the logic in modern terms. But if we talk about hardware, that's a whole different story. Maybe Neil has a better perspective here.
Maybe not so much on the hardware, but I do think that some of the assistive technologies are also supporting backwards compatibility and trying to solve inaccessibility problems on older platforms. So they're using AI and they're using machine learning to try and understand where something isn't accessible and interpret that and pass that information on to their users. We're not going to solve all of the interoperability issues of old platforms, and this is where we need to take the view, as Susanna says, to kill our babies, because I think that there comes a point where you just have to retire stuff. So when we're looking at our corporate programs, the vast majority of our efforts are forward-looking and not looking at what we're doing with old stuff. When the old stuff is inaccessible, the key thing is to have workarounds while we look to replace it, rather than fix something that is fundamentally broken and costly to maintain.
But just don't get me wrong, the backwards compatibility is there. You can run Windows 98 stuff on Windows 10 and Windows 11. Mm-hmm. It is there. It's not like it's like we're not focusing on it. It's just how things were built on Windows 98 compared to how things are built for Windows 11 are quite enhanced, completely different already from the hardware up, considering we're on different hardware architecture.
Thank you. So, and I think this kind of touches on a completely different topic that we need to speak about in another event, and that is kind of current updates and how that affects users, because that's another big issue that we have also been discussing here today, and that is kind of really difficult area to navigate without kind of stopping innovation. So, but that's for another event. Thank you very much for being with us today. The tech guys, this was the least gender balanced session of today, and it's about technology and it's the big tech. So it's kind of, okay, we're kind of ticking all the boxes. I'm sorry for that. But thank you very much for being with us and taking the time and answering all the questions. And thank you also for the questions in the audience. And then the 5 first questions they were going to get something from you. So how you're going to do that?
So you can meet me here next to the coffee machines, and I'll have the adaptive kits for you. There was 1, 2, 3, Or I got one extra if somebody wants one.
Okay, thank you very much. And for you, I will give you this little token of our appreciation. So don't forget to make time to take a break. And remember always this event. Thank you very much.